Oh yeah.
Ah, yeah. Once again, we've made it to another day.
Or have we?
Ooh.
How does our conception of time work?
Mm.
We assume that these consciousness gives us different days. Maybe they give us different universes, and we're just God's just figuring out where we're most effective.
Really, we're going to start off by questioning reality. That's going to be the opener, is questioning reality.
Welcome to the Spare Space,
Jesus.
science fiction questions in a broadcast voice. You know, if we talk about this shit long enough, you could get a PhD in dark matter.
Oh, God.
Okay? That that'd be you and Carrie.
What do you think the reality is of somebody through spaces and conversations with professionals
Yeah.
obtaining the actual knowledge required to go into a class and start taking tests and actually showing knowledge?
I could do that. Right? You have to focus on what you teach best.
Right?
Right? As long as you're focusing on what you teach best,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So it would really
You
be the
know?
question of, like, as an
It's,
example, could I teach you how to originate a mortgage?
yes.
And I think that would absolutely be easy.
But here's the thing. I would mix the modalities. Visual, which is the roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's an image map where they click and they do every step.
Sure.
Right?
Descriptions of the qualifying areas. Yeah.
It's always a choice between what you say versus what you show.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So it's almost like how would you design the engagement, right? So it's one thing to teach people how to do it. It's another thing to motivate them to do it, right? If you put a gun to their head, could they do it? If the answer is no, the answer is training, not motivation, and vice versa, right?
Interesting. I heard this one phrasing one time that someone in a position doesn't perform because they either don't feel confident or empowered enough to do their job.
Oh, so my boss said when somebody wasn't doing something, I said, "Hey," he said, "Hey, why don't you put a gun to their head?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, put a gun to their head. If they can do it, you have a motivation problem. If they can't, you have a training problem." I'm like, "Oh, okay,
That makes sense.
makes sense, right?" You say it all the time. Yeah. See, I have my greatest hits. It just depends on what I'm talking about, but it's pretty much the same, right? You see, you've heard them all,
Yeah.
so I have several times.
Yep.
You could probably do my talk.
I'm
Oh,
starting
hold
to,
on, I have an idea.
Hi, this is Michael
Allie,
Jagdow. This is Square
yes.
Speaking, and we're here this morning questioning reality.
What about you? Say that again. I missed that. So, can you do an impersonation of me?
Hi. Hold on. Hi, this is Michael Jagdow, and we're doing Square Speaking this morning, questioning the foundation of reality. Good morning.
Your turn. Wow. Allie. No, I can't. I don't know if I could be you. Just pretend. Oh. Be the essence.
Well, no, because when I think of
Yeah.
you, I just think of like do. I'm like,
Whoa, that was much more insulting than I thought it was ever going to be.
That was
Wow.
outstanding and very cute too, because it says to me like it was your humor that drew her in, you know. So that's a beautiful thing right there. I like that.
Was it that, or was it?
Uh,
Was
well,
this
just
my
stay with the
twerk? You're
humor.
liking the twerk? Jeez, that was the worst. Like, that was probably the most insulting thing you could have ever done. Because he asked you to do an impression of me, and you went, "Oh no, 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 oh no, 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 no!" Yeah, right. That's essentially. It is, so it's accurate, but it doesn't mean it doesn't cut you.
The truth, it burns. It
Right? Oh no, no,
burns.
no, no! How dare you?
That is so fucking hilarious to me.
you can't be mad when the mirror shows you.
Huh?
You asked for a mirror. You can't be mad.
Can't I?
Don't cry about the reflection. You asked for the mirror.
Exactly. Don't ask for the mirror if you don't want to see its reflection.
Dude, I think Ellie and I are gonna just team up on you one day and
Yeah.
just have a total barn burning. You
Is
know.
this how it feels for other people when they come in here?
Yup.
Is this cardamom?
Oh, it's just beautiful, is what this is.
Cardamom. Oh, come on. Fantastic.
All right, so I'm looking to recreate. Switching subjects. I'm recreating my PFP situation.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone through my stages of grief and anger and whatever else,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You see, I've been
Now you have a bipolar, and now it's
yeah.
almost like it can't even encapsulate the whole opinion,
There we go. You
right?
see, I'm working my way through it. This is self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Self-care. That's what that
No, no,
is.
no, no. It's self car
That's
because he's
horrible.
Bumblebee.
That's horrible. That's
Oh,
a transformer pun on that level right now is not that I'm fail.
Self
I'm
car.
gonna
That one.
you understand? Like this is what my life is like. Like the puns. Oh fuck. See, and this is why I tell you not to encourage it because then this happens.
They're a bad influence on me.
Horrible.
They
now
throw all of these. The thing is, they throw all of these underhands, and then I hit a pun single, right? It's like, how does he keep hitting the ball? Well, you self car.
mm,
You can't blame other people for setting you up. You don't have to take the bait.
No,
You don't have to take the bait.
there's no gap between
You
stimulus
do
and
not have to
response.
take the bait.
It
There
just
is. There is a large.
No,
It's like 0.7 seconds, isn't
Huh?
it? Of brain activity.
that's not a lot of time.
It is for brain activity.
But think about if I didn't say the pun, where we would be. Where would we be?
I'd be happier.
you know, I because you have the comic formula always in play, I am going to reconfigure the formula and break it. Just
Ooh.
just to give you something to play with and a challenge to have fun with.
Okay.
Just to give your brain something to focus on for a couple minutes so we can all have a breather.
Right. What did you talking about focusing? So okay, so you're going through the 18 stages of grief,
Mhm.
right?
I thought there was only like 6.
5, but
Some people
the only way out is through.
some people go around in a circle a few times.
There we go. Like kind of like build up momentum to break orbit, something like that.
It's kind of like a car that's not too fast to make a complete revolution, so it keeps falling down when it reaches the apex of the loop.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a
The girl that tried to run around the loop.
Huh? What
Remember that
happened?
video you always send me of the little girl trying to run around the loop?
No.
She like backs up and like really gives her.
Can't remember. Can you do it?
She's like, she looks at the loop
Mm-hmm.
and then backs up because she knows she hasn't got enough runway. And then
Oh,
like a little
yeah.
5-year-old, and then she
Yeah.
takes off running, but doesn't make it up the loop. Here's the thing. But anyways, that's what I was thinking of. It didn't matter at all. I didn't have to share that.
No, I like it. And here's the thing: there are many things shared in the Squarespace Degen conversations of broadcaster voice that are just that we don't know the meaning of yet until we encounter the situation later on in which it can be useful. And then, like in a day from now, we're like, "Fuck! Remember that thing you said about self car? Really helped out." I met a Voltron, and he thought it was a Bumble car. Imagine a Bumble car that had like different sized wheels.
no.
Right? So just like it's a Bumble car with different sized wheels on off road. Bom be don't be don't be bom be don't. Sorry.
No. So I
So
had no.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying no to everything right now.
So I think
No.
I think
Wait, are we back to grief?
are we back to grief?
No, I mean the stages of.
Hmm.
What the fuck is it called? The 5 stages of.
5 fingers of death.
No, shut up.
Um,
5 fingers point the heart explosion technique, isn't it?
I think it's a 1-inch punch.
There is also the 1-inch punch. What's the 5-point heart exploding technique?
I thought this morning when I woke up.
Yeah, the only section I thought.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, keep going.
The only section.
Apologies, I had some background disturbances.
You mean your boss? Your
Yes.
background disturbance.
That's exactly.
Sorry, this person's trying to fire me. Hold on a sec.
She failed again. Keep going.
That's good. You're very resilient.
I am, actually.
Right?
That has actually been commented lately.
You know? How many times, they want to leave and then you just added a pun. And it's like, yeah, stay. So when I think about the teaching thing, I have a bunch of stuff that I could teach, but when I walk into a classroom, I may decide to throw it all away. I reserve the right to throw my lesson plan away.
Just reading the room, right?
That's it. And that's the hard thing about stand-up, right? In stand-up, you want to, at least for me, when I was starting out, is I wanted to write the perfect speech. This is going to be the best stand-up because I'm going to have all my words. They're going to be written out. I'm going to perfect them. And that never worked it never worked for me. It couldn't work for other people. It just never worked for me. Because I was too bored. I got bored quickly. It was like, okay, they're laughing. So you're supposed to tell that joke everywhere? It's like, after the 3rd time, you're like, now what?
Your motivation is supposed to be the applause. Not the.
Fuck the audience.
I mean, like, if you... Oh, good morning, Finn.
Hey, Finn.
Good morning. Hey, there's a comment section.
How you doing, bud?
We can, like, troll.
Oh, there's a comment section for the space.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Oh,
You can control the whole thing.
Oh, that's pretty slick.
Now we can go on, like, really big spaces and push our shit. You know what I mean?
Say hello to Steppen.
Exactly, bro. It's the #1 bear killer.
That's an interesting point that Ali brought up. Do you have an internal locus of control and an external one? Do you like it when they applause, or do you like it when you yourself know it was effective, even if they never laughed once?
Why can't it be both?
It can be, and invariably our self-concept is a weighted average of how we feel about ourselves and how other people feel about us, right? Cooley's looking glass self.
Are you talking about stand-up comedy?
Huh?
Your
Stand-up
low side of
comedy as an
identity.
example.
So say that again?
Stand-up comedy as an example.
Right. And so I think the personalities that gravitate towards a stage career have an external loci of identity because that's what drives them in order to continue to make the crowd.
They're other driven?
Yeah. It's like Gaga has that song of like, she does it for the applause.
Right. Are you doing it for the applause, Stacey?
There's probably a percentage where the answer is yes, yeah.
Yes. Right? How do you
Sure.
make that possible?
You do it for the awkward silences. For your own.
Again, it's where you identify yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you need other people to validate you, then you're never going to
express yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like if you know yourself, you're not going to care what other people Do because you're not trying to change yourself in order to fit in.
That's crazy. The best set I ever had was the worst set I ever had. Because I was telling the
For the
jokes.
Hard Rock?
Yeah. Yeah. Because everyone was laughing.
Such a good set.
Everyone was laughing, but I didn't like doing it because I was just going through the motions. And I walked out of there being like, wow, you did great. And people come back, and I came back in, and I'm like, is this it now? People applaud, you make jokes, and then you tell those jokes over and over again. And I saw into the future, I'm like, I don't want to look like that.
So the quality of...
Say,
Go ahead, Finn.
Go ahead,
I
Ben.
really like a morbid kind of sad comedy. So now I have a newfound appreciation for like something that seems super rehearsed means the artist or comedian's like totally dying on the inside, so it makes it even funnier.
I'm going to send you an example of that. It's called The Button. And The Button was this show or this movie about every time you press a button, someone dies. Remember?
Yeah.
Right? It's the best. It's maybe the darkest, most funniest joke I've ever heard.
It's really good.
And it doesn't have to be dirty either. It's just really dark
Really dark.
and really hilarious. It's cool. I can do that running thing where I add it to the comments. Thanks, Vin. And imagine, Casey, you can take questions from the audience in the comment section.
Hey, sorry, got a work call, and I gotta go
All
make
good.
another one. Yeah, sorry. You know, I'll return. I'll be back.
Know how it is. What's going on, Space, Vin? What are you saying?
Well, this morning has been quite a morning, that's for sure. I kind of want to send this picture, but I don't know if I should be sending it. No, basically it has to do with a claim for a vehicle. I was telling you on DM that I was on a call with Geico because of a claim I had to submit yesterday around 4 o'clock. I'm just, man, this one restaurant that I'm going to here is like, there is no, like, you got to see the photo, like, but I don't want to send it because it's so fucking stupid that I got myself in that situation because like I had to get the car towed because it was like I could not back out of that space because of the way in which that the concrete is set. It's so stupid. Like it is so stupid. Like anyway, whatever. I'll send it to you directly. I don't want to post it, but because it's so embarrassing. But anyway, let's see.
wonder if I could do that. If I wanted to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there was no barrier. Basically, it was like an elevated sort of concrete structure, and then you have that bullshit kind of more concrete in front of concrete, like basically pulling forward 1 foot extra. Basically, you're stuck. I mean, I don't know. Like I mean, it's like they're asking you to like have a problem. Like it's like at what point is it the responsibility of a business to consider the possibility of how easy it is for that to happen? You know, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's fucking crazy. Whatever. Anyway, I mean that's just. I've been on the phone with them since yesterday, and that's kind of just what's top of mind. That's the only reason I bring it up. You know.
Yeah, I mean, if an insurance company paid every claim that came its way, it wouldn't be in business, right?
Right. And in my case, I do have a $500 deductible. But here's the thing is that there's an open claim already from back in May 10th, that I had to submit that's still not done yet because they're still waiting on parts. And the claims adjuster guy is saying, well, it's not going to be until like end of August that those parts are available. And then this happens, right? So I'm thinking like, well, shit, they're probably not going to want to touch the body shop, you know, until all the parts come in addition to what I need to order now through the insurance claim, you know. Such a pain in the ass, you know. I mean, they accepted the claim. It's not like they're saying, yeah, we're not going to cover you on this. I mean, that's not the issue in this rate. But it's just knowing that I have to drive this fucked up car that fuck. Yeah. I should have sold that damn thing when I had a chance. That's for damn sure. Here, I'll send you another angle.
Nah, so you got to do your best to total the car the first time.
Right, right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like talk about what in terms of behavior, attitude, motivation, incentivized. What's incentivized is counterintuitive to what you think would be response. Like for instance, the one thing I hear, especially in Texas, is that say you're driving and a deer jumps in front of you. They're like, hit the deer. They tell you, hit the deer. Don't try to swerve. Don't try to be a hero, whatever. Hit the fucking deer. And you think that that runs counter to your intuition of trying to avoid a collision, when in fact, if it causes another collision, then you're no longer covered as much as you probably would have been if you had hit the fucking deer. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Are you saying that insurance turns man against beast and beast against man?
I guess that's one way to look at it. Yeah, sure.
Just don't hit a moose. Don't hit a moose.
Dude, I saw one walking like in a video that
You'll
those
die.
things are fucking crazy. They're huge. Like they don't even seem like of this world, you know? Like, wow. I mean, if you hit a moose, then yeah, I think the car is the least of your worries at that point. And what is exactly what are we doing here? A Squarespace Degen conversations and a broadcaster. Oh, okay, so a broadcaster voice. Wait, is that like the new theme that you're doing, Michael? Is that like I'm trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, because what happened is,
Yeah.
because we've prior to this, Matthios, myself, a bunch of other people, we like to have a good time and we joke around, right? But sometimes when people come into the room, they don't realize we're talking about something serious. We're just doing it in a playful way. And so what we decided to do was to have the same conversation with a different design pattern, a different affectation. And thus was born the Squarespace, degenerate conversations in a broadcaster voice.
Understood. I think then what's curious to me is that there is always, in my opinion, what I tend to do. I don't know if it's theater in my background where I feel like I need to enunciate every single fucking word that I say. If that's done on purpose or just merely for the fact of the possibility whether or not someone could perhaps misunderstand what I'm saying. And when you say about like broadcaster voice, I'm thinking like a radio like voice, obviously, right? And
Yeah.
yeah. And I feel like I sometimes elicit that type of you're talking about affectation, right? The phrase of the meaning of the word, right? And it's something that I remember I was getting. Oh man, like I remember. Okay, so last year when Spaces came out, like what was it like?
So let's try it in a broadcaster voice. So imagine this is the Squarespace, degenerate conversations on a broadcaster voice. On location is Space Cat. Space Cat is fighting with Geico Insurance. Space Cat, over to you for a 30-second understanding of what's happening on the ground floor. Space Cat.
That's quite a curveball. I think I'll try to play along then.
Yes.
But I don't know how. I'll be honest.
Nobody knows how.
Yeah. Well, the ground floor in the news lately, Geico is quite a fascinating company to work with. They certainly set customer service as number one priority. That's one thing I do recognize from my interactions with them. And that really does go a long way. It reminds me of a principle of customer service where there's a guy who referred to just give them the pickle as something that is of no consequence to the company at all, but is a gesture in which that is something to be reminded by or remembered by the customer. So I guess in that kind of news, they certainly hit it out of the ballpark because I would recommend them for anyone looking for insurance. I don't know if that was playing correctly, but that's the only way I know how right now.
So what would happen in a typical broadcast is that somebody would ask you questions about what you said. Space Cat, have you spoken to the executives at Geico, and what have they told you in response to your complaint?
Well, I don't feel like I had a need to complain any further than the people in which I spoke with directly on the phone. They certainly were able to not only handle the claim, provide me all the information I needed in terms of what to expect going forward, to the extent where I would not have thought it necessary that I would need to speak to anyone else, a CEO or anyone, really.
What would you say to the CEO of Geico if you could speak to them today, given where you are in your claim? What would you tell them? What should they know about your experience?
I would give them the respect and props that they deserve from a top-down institution that they run, that they're certainly doing the right thing in terms of how to manage a claim, how to respond to a claim, how to bring a tow truck to a distressed person who is unable to, take a vehicle out from a disabled position. So the best part about it, I would give them props for, is the idea that when you're on their app on iPhone or Android, and you're going through the process of a claim, for instance, if you need to call someone or someone needs to call you, one thing they specifically say is that we captured your contact information or we captured your progress on the app. So the next person has a continuity of understanding of where you're coming from, so you don't have to repeat yourself. That, I think, is the kind of the pickle right there, the golden ticket, the reason in which that it makes it so much simpler to be able to communicate with someone, given the complexity possible.
Oh, are you saying that
Yeah.
this continuity allows you to feel like you're interacting with the same person at Geico, even though it might be a team of people at any one time working on your claim? It feels like they're all working in concert for you.
Correct. I would say that is something that is an uncommon sort of feeling or realization, say, compared to any other company I've worked with, or even specifically, I would say, in the medical community, where you're talking about patient continuity of care as a corollary, where you're talking to person A, then you're talking to person B, and there's no cross communication between the two. So left hand and right hand doesn't know what the other is doing. And that is what makes it very frustrating as a potential client, potential customer, a patient, whatever it is that you would call the individual at that point, from being able to receive the care or the attention that is necessary to assuage any sort of concern that may or may not have occurred, just from the interaction itself, let alone the incident, why it is they're even contacting you to begin with. Anyway,
I think it's great feedback for Geico. Would you
Yeah.
like us to share it with them so you can become the new CEO of Geico?
no. It's just my current sort of understanding, or my experience, at least as of this morning. Like, it was like 6 a.m. and I'm like, come on, no one's gonna be talking to me at 6 a.m. Like, no one's gonna be open. There's no office that's gonna no, but they did, and it certainly sounded like an American voice, or someone like Roger from New Delhi, who perfected the act very well. But no, it sounded like you're talking to a friend. It's very fascinating. It really is. I mean, I've never had that kind of same experience with any other company in general. I mean, and I'm not even being hyperbolic in saying so. I don't know.
I think a large corporation being able to set up their customer service such that you feel like you're talking to a friend in this day and age is a monumental achievement.
Yeah, I think that's not something to be underscored. It is something that is to be, yeah, you're right. I mean, because any other company I remember ever talking to, I mean, it's not even car insurance. I mean, anything else, it's so impersonal. It's so there's such a kind of disassociation, or kind of or distance that seems to be created on purpose or not. I mean, I'm not sure, because sometimes I think that some companies have to have that type of dispersonal aspect of it, so that it doesn't feel like you're talking to someone like, for whatever reason it may be, from a CEO top-down perspective. I'm just wondering, in what case would that be something that's intentionally done versus something like this, where you're in there's a crisis mode. You have to call someone, you have to call a tow truck, you have to like deal with a new crisis on top of another. Well,
It's a very it's very impressive that Geico has been able to become so large, yet even in this binary transactional world, you were able to find a friend on the phone with Geico. I don't think that's very easy to do. I think that's a major accomplishment for them.
yes, I certainly agree. I can't, like, just if I were to just pick a company out of like my out of a hat, I couldn't even imagine another company I could point a finger to and say, yeah, they do the same thing, or they are even in the same ballpark. I mean, it is that noteworthy, I would say, in my humble opinion.
Welcome to the Squarespace, Sajad. The Squarespace, degenerate conversations in a broadcaster voice. We've just heard from Space Cat on location in a parking lot, waiting for his car to get removed. Sajad is on site in the metaverse, designing, researching, and testing. Sajad, where do we find you today?
Yes, hi everyone over here. I hope you can hear me correct and clear.
Loud and clear.
So,
100%. You talk.
sorry, Mike.
No worries. So this is the Squarespace degenerate conversations in a broadcaster voice. Up until maybe last week, we were having maybe too good of a time, and because we were having too good of a time, some people came in and they took the conversation in kind of inane directions. And so what I decided to do is have the same space we were doing before, but just using a broadcaster voice to make sure that people didn't go off the rails too much. How are you today?
Yeah, hi. Actually, I'm doing great. I'm good. And when I saw that space title, I guess like there'd be interesting conversation over here, and that's why I said, let me join in. You know, the Squarespace, Degen conversation and broadcast voice. So, it's actually the title which turned me on to say, let me join this space and hear what's happening here. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So we've just heard from Space Cat. Space Cat has encountered a wonderful paradox in that a very large insurance company, a company for which personality is seemingly impossible, Space Cat has been able to encounter people who actually seem human. We thought that was pretty amazing. What are you up to today?
So you just cut it out, and I couldn't hear some couple of words, you know.
What are you up to today?
I'm trying to refresh this kind of question, and I didn't get its meaning. You know, I'm not a native English speaker. That's why.
So this is the Squarespace degenerate conversations in a broadcaster voice. We just heard from Space Cat, who is having a surprisingly pleasant interaction with an insurance company. Maybe there is hope for human-to-human interaction in the blockchain, but probably not. Sajad, what are you up to today? And that was
Once
Sajad. Go ahead.
Oh my God! I'm sorry to say this once again. I know. May you rephrase, or may you try to use alternative kind of phrase, or within that
I
kind of.
can definitely use different words, different nomenclature, different diction. What we come to speak about is mostly found in the space between the words. But again, once again, what we're doing here is enjoying ourselves, but not too much, right? Sometimes when you enjoy yourself too much, things get off the rails. And so we're trying to maybe dance, but maybe use smaller movements, let's say. What are you up to today?
Oh yeah. So actually, I was just actually like kind of designing these issues. Sorry, designing this kind of printing cartoons, which they're going to use in one of the exhibition. Um, when I was designing this kind of cartoons, I found like the client who I was designing with this didn't like she didn't send so many resources which could help it stand out. So I had to use another idea to just extract and create something which can be catchy with limited resources, like a kind of this icons, pictures, logos, and other typical things which they start out in creative form. So when I decided and completed it, when I sent it to her, she said like, yeah, it's perfect. I didn't know if you can end it to be like this as I didn't send the source of first, and I was sorry about that. If I can opt for the change, would be able to do this. And I said, yeah, I can do this change because I still have a prep time for it. So when she just sent it back, I did it and it completed it, and now they get printed out to make it happen within that exhibition, which is going to happen in the 7th of July. So that was actually the thing I was up to.
How did it make you feel?
I can say it has added like a kind of point on confidence and regarding my happiness, because I did something creative as day to day in this world, and yeah, I feel confident and happy to complete this task.
Do you feel like you can take on larger tasks now that you've done this complex one?
Yes, I believe I can do that because it's not the first garage task. I've did so many within the national and international level. I did so many different tasks for the companies in different niches, in different industry, from music, creative, digital, tech, startups, NGOs, organizations, individuals, artists, and so many more. So it's improved my confidence that maybe I need to come out and say I'm open to work with anyone to the world now.
Do you have a portfolio that you show people of your past successes?
Right now, I'm just building my online portfolio, which will be easy to each and everyone to diverge in and see what I did, and which can be like a resume and a portfolio at the same time and a CV, so that can make more sense than giving this kind of um, 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 um,
Do
yes,
you have testimonials from your clients?
yes, absolutely. I have testimonials from more than 5 clients.
I think the more you can gather those testimonials, the more people will hear your message. Because if we say it, it's false. If they say it, it's true.
Yes, definitely, and that's why right now I'm coding this my type of new website, which will stand all of this, and I will integrate all of those feedbacks there and testimonials, so people can see what creator I made on there. Will make more sense that you see, let's say an AR for the sub-record label, which is work with a partnership with Warner Bros. Said something about Sajad or Sergio, will make more sense to someone to say, oh, if he did this,
Exactly.
then yeah.
Yeah, with a few of the businesses I'm working with right now, I noticed that they have customers that would provide testimonials, but they haven't captured them yet. And invariably, the first thing I do in working with a company is let's make sure that we capture the reviews from your customer. Let's make sure we capture that. So it's not just you talking about how good you are, it's them.
Yes, definitely, and that's why I'm keeping saying like when I'm completely building this kind of um, 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 a website which will showcase all of these things, will it make more sense to come out and stand. So don't have much time to talk so many, because people they will see what I mean from that perspective. Seeing testimonial there, seeing the crowd that work with there, it would make more sense.
Absolutely. For one of the companies I worked with, I just focused almost exclusively on testimonials. And the inbound traffic that we were able to drive was very small, but significant, because we're doing business to business. So there's only maybe 5 to 10 organizations that we really need to sell to in Canada. And so I was not so much surprised because it was always my intention to convert content into currency, but it just took me a long time to not only believe in myself enough that it could be done, and then apply the requisite time for that strategy to bear fruit.
It sounds like what is being described in this case is the difference between low and high time preference, if I'm not mistaken.
Low and high what?
When, in terms of economics terms, low time preference versus high time preference, from an individual perspective, it is something that would signify, for instance, a behavior, for instance, say if one is a drug addict, that is high time preference thinking. You want that hit, you want that now, as opposed to thinking about, for instance, if you have anyone as a nephew, child, as a parent, for instance, going forward in life, to think about how one would pay it forward. From a low time preference perspective, for instance, that is what one thinks about, is where am I not now, but where am I 50 years from now? Not just me, but the people around me as well, just the same.
Yeah, it's I've learned that I have to separate. I have to ask myself one question when I get into any kind of sales, advertising, marketing scenario, which is this business to business or is this business to consumer? I've noticed that's the one question that allows me to apply the right metaphor frameworks.
So when you think about, for instance, business B2B versus B2C, what are the two differences between the two that you find that are most not flagrant, but evident, obvious, or noteworthy between the two?
Typically, the vibe in business to consumer is that, can you help me go viral? That's what they're really asking, right? Can you help me go viral? And with business to business, it's how much cold hard cash can you generate for me? They don't care about going viral. If they got 0 views on their YouTube, but they had people calling them up, asking them to develop high ticket dollar solutions, they'd be completely happy. And so with the B2B folks, it's been, the challenge is the same in both, which is I'm trying to convince them that they don't need to go viral in order to make a lot of money. Because your highest source of revenue is your current customers, not new ones, because it's so expensive to go after new customers. So it's kind of just shifting that mindset from, do I want to go viral or do I want to make money?
How would you estimate in that kind of situation the customer acquisition cost, I think that you were referring to earlier? How is that defined, described, or ascertained depending on the interaction or the business in question?
It depends on your strategy. So I think for the last 5 years, people have been trying to buy customers with social media, right? They'll be like, okay, we have $1 million ad budget. We're going to spend that $1 million ad budget on Twitter. We're going to spend that $1 million ad budget on LinkedIn or whatever. But we're realizing now that just because you have 1 million impressions doesn't mean 1 million people saw it, right? After Elon Musk's due diligence, we realized that all these analytics we were using to try to gauge if we were effective are actually useless and broken and not anywhere close to the truth. So I think people are waking up to the fact that, you know what, I thought I was getting attention But when I looked at the attention I supposedly got versus my sales, there was a difference. And now we realize the difference between attention and sales is that 90% of the attention is from bots.
Which also, from my perspective, leads to a kind of an interesting quandary in terms of following and followers, say from the perspective of Twitter. I often receive, for instance, a bunch of followers who look to be basically online prostitutes. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to unfriend them or block them or anything, because the sheer number count of followers in and of itself seems to be something of merit on its own right, regardless of, as you say, it's all bots, I think. Just because there is no interaction or legitimacy behind the account itself, from a cursory perspective, it does seem to appear to be of value or of note, regardless.
Why do you say that?
Well, because from a cursory perspective, as I had indicated, it gives the impression that one is more popular, more interacted with than they actually are.
Yeah, there's a music documentary on all of those click farms that are artificially pushing up the views of music to try to get them to sell. It's a whole short and long tail revenue kind of thing. But you're right. It is effective to pretend to the audience that there are more people at the concert than are actually there. It's kind of like if you go to NFT in New York, right? You'll see, wow, there's a lot of beautiful women here. And you don't realize, no, those are atmosphere models.
True, true. I'm thinking about any sort of similar type of, say, a conference or an event or something like that, where someone is basically paid to look pretty. And that's it. That's the entire aspect of the contractual obligation. And it works. That's why it happens. That's why that is sought out by businesses, for instance, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. In sales, if you ever go to a conference, you'll see models selling software. And I'm not saying that models don't know about software. It's just, it's almost like as an industry, we've kind of, as evolved as our prefrontal cortex is with regards to the way that people sell their product, the thinking is still very animalistic when we think about how to generate attention.
Yes, I see what you mean. I mean, I think what that comes down to is that whole concept of, what is it, Daniel Kahneman, thinking fast and slow, the two layers of thinking, the reptilian brain versus what would otherwise be considered to be something of rationality, of reason, that's hijacked by pure autonomic conditions of something that is pretty to see in person, which of course is a fallacy. But it seems to me that
it's a fallacy. That was a good one. That was a great pun. It's not a fallacy.
But you were cutting out. I didn't catch what you said, though.
Sorry, I think that was a great pun. Instead of calling it a fallacy, you called it a phallus. Right?
I lost the broadcaster voice for a second there, but
It's okay. It's okay. That's the point of the whole idea of the Squarespace degenerate conversations and a broadcaster voice is the idea that we could talk about the phallus without going full degenerate. Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
Well, that's been phalluses with Spacecat. Spacecat, thank you. comrade. How's it going? We're talking about the phallus that we all sometimes fall prey to.
Perhaps it seems like it is a meta form of cognition or communication that vexes.
What? So, do you think the word fallacy has its etymology or etiology in phallus?
I will have to ask Dr. Google.
No, because they have different F sounds. PH and F are different languages.
Good point.
That's why English is so fucking dumb. It's like stolen all words from all these different places, and we only use the punctuation and pluralization
Whoa.
and verbiage of its original. So that's why English is so it's so convoluted.
I like it though. I'm an English defender
I am
because I'm
not.
native English.
Yeah, it's my only language, but I fucking hate
So
it.
Latin fallere means to deceive or
Yeah.
phallus.
Deception,
Fallacia.
late 15th century. Fallacia.
Wow. It's
Hmm.
fallacia is guile. That's fantastic.
Huh.
So if you encounter a fallacy, what you're really doing is encountering a being who is being overconfident with regards to their member.
Overconfident of their member, both physically or in terms of their own method of presenting themselves. For instance, when you're smart or you're rich, you don't have to flaunt it because it's already known to be true.
Yes. In the same way that a monopoly has the incentive to pretend that they're engaging in perfect competition.
As in to say perfect competition, but the fallacy there is that it's not perfect.
Exactly.
I may need further clarification on that point, however, just the same. Interestingly enough, from the Enemy Online, there is an entry linking to fallacy as to fail, fallacious, fail, to be unsuccessful in accomplishing a purpose, cease to exist or to function, come to an end, or fail to in expectation or performance.
So think about an NFT project, right? A lot of NFT projects have to show that there is some sort of community around the endeavor. And some people either build a community or pretend that they have a community with a lot of members. And so in the case where you have an NFT project for whom the members are very small, they may engage in phallus behavior to try to pretend that their membership is larger than it actually is.
So in other words, it's almost as if to suggest a level of autonomy that does not exist, the level in which that one can suggest a part of being to a whole. Community itself, it seems to me, is whether or not that is the driving factor of a marketing campaign, or is it merely just exit liquidity otherwise?
In the short run, it attracts capital. In the long run, they become exit liquidity, yes. Because the community is sold on the return to the Garden of Eden. But they don't realize that the Garden of Eden, they're being sold, doesn't get any sunlight, and so everything is rotten there. But the venture capitalists and the hedge funds, they don't have an incentive to create a great product as much as they have an incentive to create great returns. And so there's a bifurcation between the people who have paid to create the thing and the people who seek to return to the Garden of Eden.
So it's a house of mirrors.
Could be an Indra's net, absolutely. What we see is a reflection of ourself, not what is being looked at or observed. If you're just joining us, this is the Squarespace, Degenerate Conversations in a Broadcaster Voice. Here at the Squarespace, we talk about any number of members and memberships and try to separate fact from phallus.
Yeah, I can't top that. That's too good.
I've been practicing for the past 2 weeks. So it's one of those things where in improv, they teach us that you never say no to a suggestion. Yes, and is exactly it, right? And so I think it's just the ability to expand the scope in which you yes and.
Yes, and to come to fruition in my mind, I think the phrase or the question or the wording is called etymological fallacy.
Right.
That is committed when an argument makes a claim about the present meaning of a word based exclusively on that word's etymology. And that's from Wikipedia, not from me.
Well, you know how people read the Bible literally? Some people are biblical literalists. I believe today we have a phenomenon we can affectionately call blogical literalists. People for whom reality is perfectly reflected in that which they read off the internet.
Biblical. However, also it seems to indicate this question in my mind about the difference between something that is to be treated as a metaphor versus literal fact.
If you look at it though, we use our metaphor frameworks to decide what facts are and to organize the perceptible world, right? The frameworks are the way that we organize the reflections of light from the sun.
True, there appears to be a form of abstraction that is always necessary for the mind to be able to encompass the thought itself. In a similar vein of thinking, is it that one can encompass the idea of the universe being as expansive as it is? That there has to be, in some capacity, a form of low resolution thinking that needs to come as form of expression for the lowest common denominator of communication amongst people to be able to make sense of something that is so highly complex otherwise.
The frameworks that we have are very seductive, right? And most people believe that they have opinions where they really have a set of metaphor frameworks through which they observe, orient, decide, and act.
For some reason, the phrase that comes to mind is something that a fellow friend of mine had sent my way. That phrase is something that one also utters in the times of tragic circumstance of, say, violence. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. To some people, that might feel almost like an offense, an injunction, a kind of transgression, because the words ring hollow to the ear. However, does that always indicate the similar form of intent by the other person, who might mean well by in saying so? Yet there is a cognitive dissonance that may also appear in this case, where it is something that is said, that phrase, thoughts and prayers, that absolves one of anything in terms of their own affliction, or of their own necessity, or no, that is not correct.
I think you're right, though, that I believe that if you took a sample of 100 people right now who use the text message, thoughts and prayers, you would find that they didn't think or pray about the subject in which they said they would. And if you consider the weight of those words, thoughts and prayers, it's kind of if you're a religious person, it could be the biggest lie that somebody ever tells you, that they're going to pray for you and they don't.
Or, in addition to that, the prayer is of your own demise. Because if one is considered to be a heathen, that is often at the same time when thoughts and prayers are conveyed.
It's it's when prayer, Prayer, becomes prayer, Preyer.
So, as if to suggest then that one is to pray as in to a higher power, versus to prey upon someone that perhaps they might find subservient, or someone who could possibly be perhaps then someone who is a target for predation.
Prediction. I like that. It's hunting using your language.
He he.
I'm not sure if you were there where we were talking about the origin of laughter.
No, I was not, but it seems like we have lost our audience, but that's okay, because I'm having
The
too much
beautiful
fun.
thing about the Squarespace is that I don't care necessarily if there's lots of people here, as long as the conversation is moving towards something I think is meaningful or can be meaningful in perpetuity. When the people of the future are deriving benefit, even though people didn't see what was happening in real time. So, for example, we were talking about comedy yesterday, and I was telling everyone that from a communication perspective, things really took a turn for me when I started doing stand-up comedy. And so at the top, I set out a theory of laughter that was not set out by me, but more Bergstrom and Arthur Kessler. So, Space, I would love if you would. You're actually one of the few people who could actually deeply understand what I'm trying to say here. I would love for you to scan the article and see if you agree, disagree, or fall somewhere in between.
Well, I certainly appreciate the kind of confidence in my ability. It sounds like you said that you had shared the article for me to review.
It should be at the top.
There we go. Digital mercenary. Why people laugh at pun. Oh, okay. Okay. I may have to digest this before I can even perhaps provide any sort of meaningful feedback.
Imagine that you're reading it in an audience of people. So maybe you can just scan it and then say the words that you, you know, that you find significant.
So why do people laugh at puns? Wait, why do people laugh in the first place? Well, I can already tell the idea is that just like the ever so popular actor Hugh Laurie playing Dr. House MD also was and is a prolific sort of a pianist in terms of also a blues artist.
A pianist, is that Penist?
A pianist, I think, is more of the accurate phrase. So
Because
it's not valid.
a pianist is essentially playing a percussive instrument.
Piano. What is the word then for piano? To be a pianist.
Maybe it's a percussive musician, somebody that makes women sing using their pianist abilities.
I'll have to table that for next time. But
Yes.
the question in my mind, though, however, is the phrase that came to mind was that you laugh to keep from crying.
Time plus tragedy equals comedy. Therefore, right? If you move around that algebra of terms, I think you'll find something fascinating. If it is true that time plus tragedy equals comedy, then tragedy equals comedy minus time.
So people laugh as a way to release the energy produced when they experience cognitive dissonance. Oh wow, okay. It's almost like interesting.
This, yep.
When do people experience this dissonance? People experience dissonance when people have to consider two seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time. I see. So this is fascinating already. So how do you eat your peach? Oh, I see, because then I mentioned Peaches by the United States of America, the band. Mangoes or peaches. I actually was curious to know what brought that conversation into fruition of mangoes versus peaches versus any other type of, fruit, vegetable, or any type of form of edible. So you made a video that made people laugh today on Twitter. After you watched the video, why is the video making people laugh? People are laughing at this video because it produces an experience of cognitive dissonance, which produces energy. Okay, so energy is laughter. So energy is like a law of thermodynamics. It is a transfer of energy from maybe something that perhaps is to be, at one point, something to be fraught over, or something that one at a funeral, for instance. Who laughs at a funeral?
Keep reading. You're going to see everything that you're talking about is being addressed.
Okay, very well. Did you want me to read this out the way I have so far?
Yeah, I love it. I love it because you're discovering it, and it allows me to know as the writer if I'm being effective or ineffective at any given paragraph or sentence.
Very well. So, energy that is released as laughter. How does it produce an experience of cognitive dissonance? Question. The video produces an experience of dissonance because the audience has to consider two seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time. Eating peaches and oral sex, which, by the way, is the subtext of that music video. So let's break this down. The audience is watching a video which features Donnie Darko. Oh, okay. explaining how he would eat a peach. Darko, very good film. While Donnie is explaining how he would eat a peach, the audience is simultaneously watching a sexually suggestive video which transforms Donnie's speech into pillow talk. There are two matrices at play: the eating of peaches and oral sex. Eating peaches and oral sex are two seemingly contradictory ideas. When the audience considers the act of eating peaches and the act of oral sex simultaneously, two seemingly contradictory experiences, it produces cognitive dissonance, which produces energy, which is released as laughter. And as a side note for me, myself, I think the same kind of experience is performed or experienced when someone eats a banana. But there's deeper mechanism at play. The act of creation. Is that Kessler? All acts of creation are generated by the sudden bisociation of previously unrelated matrices of experience. Okay. Soccer and basketball. What's the difference? Here's a joke. The only difference between soccer and basketball is the currency used to bribe the referees. Let's understand why that joke is funny. Again, all acts of creation are generated by the sudden bisociation of previously unrelated matrices of experience. Soccer is a matrix of experience. Some people call it a matrix of experience, a domain. For the purposes of this conversation, we'll consider a matrix and a domain the same thing. So soccer is a matrix of experience, aka domain. So when you go to a soccer match, you expect to see players, 2 goals, referees, and a ball that the players kick with their feet. Basketball is a matrix of experience, aka domain, just the same. No? When you go to a basketball game, you expect to see players, 2 nets, referees, and a ball that the players bounce, pass, and shoot with your hands. The only difference between soccer and basketball is the currency used to bribe the referees. That's the joke. Soccer is a matrix of experience, and basketball is a matrix of experience. So when we create a connection between these two different sports, the way in which their referees are bribed, the audience has to consider 2 seemingly contradictory ideas simultaneously. When the audience has to consider the bribes in soccer and the bribes in basketball, the cognitive dissonance produced by trying to consider these 2 seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time produces energy, which is released as laughter. As to repeat, all acts of creation are generated by the sudden bisociation of previously unrelated matrices of experience. I see. Does this quote make sense now? Okay, got it. Okay, so now let's consider puns now. Dude, this is crazy. I'm gonna have to read this. Like I can't just no. I'm gonna have to read this later because that's crazy.
Keep going. That sounds great. We're almost at the end.
Well, okay. Let's see. Where are we? The right tools. Okay. So, why do puns make people laugh? Are you saying that this is part of the end?
We're almost at the end. Yeah, we're almost at the end.
Oh, okay. I can't tell because I'm on my phone. Conan O'Brien says, "What is the name of the movie?" What the name of the movie? Did he say it that way specifically? Pelrose Place Lady says, "Chairman of the board." And then you have Norm Macdonald. I bet it's spelled B-O-R-E-D, board, not board like a board of a chairman. So here's a pun. When Asian poets eat Starburst, they call it haichu. Huh. Why do people laugh at puns? People laugh at puns because they create an experience of cognitive dissonance because the audience has to consider two seemingly contradictory ideas as the same time, which create energy that's released as laughter, which seems repetitive at this point. A pun is an effective way to make people laugh because a pun is a word that can operate in two or more matrices of experience as known as domains at the same time. So let's practice. Here are some more examples of jokes that generate laughter because they create a situation where the audience has to consider two seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time, which produces energy that's released as laughter. Question: can you tell what matrices of experience are being presented simultaneously? So we have videos from Dave Chappelle, Sesame Street. I wonder if it has to do with, without seeing it, whether or not it's the video where he is in a limousine and there is a baby selling crack on the corner. I wonder if
It's the one where he says, you know, when we watch Sesame Street, they're always being mad at Oscar the Grouch. But they don't realize that Oscar the Grouch is homeless. What, right? That's why he's upset.
Yes. I'll have to watch that here. And then you have Norm Macdonald moth joke, which I'm not familiar with either. And then this third thing that looks to be more like a Daily Motion. Oh, shoot. I dropped it. I lost. Okay, here we go. Well, without being able to answer, I mean, to
Yeah, so keep going. Right?
So-
Now,
so-
this is the conclusion at the end.
So in review, why do people laugh? People laugh because they experience cognitive dissonance produced when they are forced to consider two seemingly contradictory ideas simultaneously. So this is like 3 or 4 times this phrase has been stated, which creates energy, which is released as laughter. For more reading, check out Arthur Kessler, The Act of Creation. The backstory. So about a decade ago, I got fed up with finance and began doing stand-up comedy. I soon met someone who would become my mentor in comedy by the name of Quinn C. Martin. Quinn was always focused on why people were laughing. It seemed like a simple question back then. I mean, I wanted to know something similar yet different. I wanted to know how to make people laugh. Invariably, I began listening to my favorite comedians to get ideas. But then I ended up just becoming a caricature of them. Okay, I see. Then I read this book called Zen and the Art of Stand-Up Comedy. That book taught me the premise, punchline, tag, joke structure, rule of threes, and other standard fare tricks of the trade. But then I came across The Act of Creation by Arthur Kessler, a book mentioned by George Carlin, of all, during his last interview. It was 700 pages. I only needed the first 100 to understand something deeper than laughter, creativity itself. And now I'm looking at an image of how it is that Kessler's act of creation is formed, which I'm not sure I'm able to describe in speech. So infinity is where things which don't. Infinity is where things happen which don't. The choice of the term matrix is less easy to explain. In an earlier version, I used field and framework, but field is too vague and frame too rigid. So a matrix is derived from the Latin for womb and is figuratively used for any pattern or mold in which things are shaped and developed, or type is cast. Thus, the exercise of a habit or a skill is quote unquote molded by its matrix. In mathematics, matrices are rectangular arrays of numbers. capable of all sorts of magic. They can be subjected to various transformations without losing their identity. And an example, they are both flexible and stable. So matrices have a constant attached to them. This is called their determinant, which remains unaffected by any of these transformations. But the analogy between determinant and code is extremely loose and in more than one respect misleading. So a few other things to consider when communicating. We have persona-driven communication. What the learner learns is a function of what they already know. What someone learns in an interaction is measured by the amount of surprise they experience. So people are primarily interested in themselves. So if you're not talking about them, they probably are not going to at all be interested in what you have to say. And so Dr. Robert Wetzel says, we ingest content through our metaphor frameworks. Huh. So who are the two people who can make fun of the king? The king, the jester, right? There are two people who can make fun of the king without losing their head. The queen, the joker. Consider these three people, the king, the queen, and the joker. All right, so each of these beings express their truth very differently. The king employs logic, the queen employs art, and the joker employs comedy. So we have a joker as the comedian, the king who is a form of logic, and the queen who is a form of it as an artist. Similarly, all ideas can be expressed in three ways: comical, logical, and artistic. Academics feel that only logic can hold the truth. Jokers and comedians specialize in expressing constructs using laughter. So you have artists and musicians prefer to hold the truth song and lyric and painting. Odd sentence. Each of these people, the academic, the comedian, the artist, are all right and they're all wrong simultaneously, I assume. Wisdom is disembodied. Understanding is embodied through use. So you have techne versus episteme, the knowledge of something versus the knowledge of doing something. So you have the idea of expressing ideas across the comedic, logical, and artistic, which was expressed by Kessler in the triptych. The triptych depicts how the joker, logician, and artist use similar but different tools of inquiry to describe phenomenon. A comic simile, hidden analogy to a poetic image. Witticism tied to epigram, tied to, I'm not going to even pronounce that word. Coincidence triggers fate. Debunking, discovering is revealing. A riddle is problem is illusion. You might have lost me there towards the end, but otherwise, that is quite a fascinating read. Damn.
Good times. That was great.
Good times. No, thank you. Yeah.
Again, what the learner learns is a function of what they already know. You're one of actually the few people, right, who has the requisite background not to get stuck with matrix or domain, right? You're able to understand those things.
I now understand why you had recommended initially to me about a year ago to this day, perhaps, Wilhelm Reich. Listen, little man, I had pondered why for the longest time why you had recommended it to me, and it makes much more sense now than ever before. So thank you for that.
Did you ever end up digging into it?
I have it in front of me, but it was too painful to finish.
Isn't it the most painful book you've ever read?
What can I say? Yes. Yes. That has been like almost, if you want to call it a mission or a goal this year, was for me to get from cover to cover, because every other word would send me down a spiral, and that would become its own thing, and it's in its own right. And part of the fascination, in my opinion, has to do with the idea of when it was written. And I'm looking at the copyright. 1974, so we're talking 50 years. And we're talking about this idea that the structures, the thoughts, the concessions, the ideas that are being presented, that are also encased and printed in historic knowledge of humans themselves, that becomes something of its own, in its own right, a work of marvel. So what I take away from it, however, at this point, and my understanding of it, is that what I need to do, I don't need to do, ought to do, must do, is acquire fewer books that I will never actually read. Because it seems like a form of mental masturbation to buy a book just to put on a bookshelf, to give the impression that one is more learned than they actually are.
Unfortunately, more often than not, I find language used to deceive, not to communicate or educate. Language used to obscure, right? Language used to catch a deer in its headlights.
The one you don't want to swerve away from and actually hit for insurance reasons, right?
That's calling going full circle.
Indeed. So the idea of words being used in a certain manner to distract, to deceive, it seems like words themselves only exist for that for that condition, because you have action, you have words, you have nouns, you have adverbs, right? And they are fundamentally distinct in the manner in which they present themselves in the world. For example, one of the questions that have been recently posed to me, something that I still struggle with to this day, is a hierarchy of values. And it's a question of values. What do you value in your life? And it seems to me something that a lot of people, myself included, have become transfixed, vexed, confused by. Because a lot of people think of values like a noun, family, generosity, these kinds of things. But guess what? Okay, so let's say, for example, that it's something that one believes to be true. Well, then let's say we talk to someone else who happens to be a mobster, a gangster, someone who legitimately is an awful person in real life, who kills people. But they still say values, family, generosity, honesty, etc. However you want to phrase it, right? Loyalty, yeah, to the family, right? So now you have this type of similar cognitive dissonance, where you have an individual who one can say is objectively a terrible person, and then you have someone who is objectively a decent person, both saying that they have the same values. But what they're not talking about values, though. They're talking about priorities, the nouns, the priorities. But only then, when you translate those priorities into actual values, which would be more like an adverb type of injunction, then and only then. What's up? What's up?
Virtues virtues are values in action.
Virtues are values in action. I see. So to be virtuous. Okay, that opens a whole different. Yeah. No, okay, I dig it.
And I didn't come up with that, by the way. That's Lauren Schwartz, the power of full engagement. And they said that human beings oscillate between periods of work, rest, and rejuvenation.
Mm-hmm.
And they call that us to manage our energy, not our time. And so, as I was reading through these books, you realize the arbitrary nature of language. Like language is being a gun that can be pointed in any direction you want, right? And I think you see that happening even with the abortion debate right now. There's many ways to describe the abortion debate right now. Some can say it's the patriarchy run amok. Others can say that it is the return from federal rights to state rights,
Yes.
right?
As if to assume that somehow going from federal to state approaches individual rights any better than it already had been in some sense of the word. When one talks about pro-choice, pro-life, for instance, that's a con man's game in terms of the phrasing of the words pro-life versus pro-choice.
Well, it's an emotional conjugation, right?
Correct.
You ever hear president, strongman, dictator? These three words can all be used to describe the same being, just from the perspective of if you're in his cabinet versus if you're getting a carpet bombed. Same person, president, strongman, dictator. Take Donald Trump, president, strongman, dictator, right?
Yep.
Reliably, when the word Trump is forever, mentioned, there's going to be not a logical meaning making, but an emotional meaning making. And when we hear Trump, some people hear president, some people hear strongman, some people hear dictator. They're simply conjugations emotionally of the word. And we're essentially dealing with what's called a nominal fallacy, right? The naming of things is not reality itself. In fact, reality, if you believe Whitehead, exists by virtue of all of its accidents. And so going back to values and virtues, the powerful engagement said that if you want to live a virtuous life, because our will is so weak, our free will tends to be weakened by the reality in which we find ourselves. Some people would argue that's not there at all. But he said, if it is true that only a handful of our acts on a daily basis are conscious, then the only way to convert values that we wish to ascribe to virtues in terms of values that we act out is to create rituals. Rituals that we do every day that allows us to convert what we say our values are into virtues, which are acted upon and impressed upon and experienced by other people.
And at the same time, however, it seems like in the act of doing so, the very same act is then bastardized because the act of ritual defeats the purpose, as if it is just remote, like not remote, but of emote or of muscle memory.
Yes. There is a. He said there were four energy stores. There was the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. And that if you could find these rituals have to constantly evolve in order for them to be fresh, right? But the idea that if you would exercise these energy stores of physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional, that you would have to be very intentional about how that was going to happen, rather than just merely try to speak it into existence by saying, I hold these values to be true and dear.
Hold values true and dear. There appears to also, seems to me, a kind of, I think the word you have referenced is a dissonance between how one feels that they should act and the way in which that they are expected to act by their family, friends, their peers, society itself. And there seems to be a disingenuous nature that also comes to fruition from this type of dissonance as well, where someone claims to be following a certain virtuous life when in reality they are anything but.
Some would say that we are not engaged in a dialogue, but a pitiless monologue.
Is that a quote that I can look into?
Yes, it is from a discussion of Whitehead and Deleuze, I believe. And they were looking at the nature of conversation. You know, we typically think of conversation as thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? That the Hegelian dialect.
I think at some point I'm going to have to come to terms with the fact that your level of knowledge and skill is way beyond what I can personally be able to match. So I did identify though.
I actually found. I think you're going to be able to get it. So I'm going to put it to the top.
Oh, okay.
This is something I was reading with Matthios actually, so you can hear his voice on the video. But I posted the picture of it.
Deleuze, Whitehead, Butler. Yeah, I was looking at something by Stephen Shapiro is what came to my search. Okay, let me.
I put it at the top. It's the most recent one. It's a picture. This paragraph, I think you will really enjoy.
Okay. Pause this. So, you're talking about the introduction paragraph, I assume.
It should be just the picture there, with modes of violence at the top. With the word.
I'm trying to. Well, it's a video, so it's 2 minutes. 8.
Actually, I just posted the picture, but let me space. You can see it.
Well, I mean, I'm sure this what you're referring to is in that video, but I'm not sure if I'm seeing what you're.
Oh, it's a picture. You'll see the picture at the top.
Okay, no, yeah, I see that one now. Okay, so modes of violence on page 141, right? Okay. So I'm guessing relationship of what is said to what others are saying. As for the first sense of challenging, this is why Deleuze and Guattari accuse Socrates, or at least Plato's Socrates of the early dialogues. If one accepts Davidson's arguments, which I don't know what they are, of failing even to engage in dialogue, but rather in a quote-unquote pitiless monologue that eliminates the rivals one by one, or why they are not attracted to the view of philosophy as providing pleasant or aggressive dinner conversations at Mr. Rorty's. Not getting that reference either. In both cases, what is engaged in is not challenging dialogue, but either the elimination of dialogue, quote unquote, in the, or parentheses, in the case of Socrates, or the questioning of doxa, D-O-X-A, in order to return to or in exchange for another doxa, in the case of Rorty. Okay, the challenging dialogue of Whitehead, Deleuze, and Butler is one that seeks a creative, critical practice that is neither reducible to a doxa, nor will it desist from challenging even one's own dialogue if it subsequently becomes doxa. In both senses, therefore, an encounter with Butler's texts on their own and in connection with the text of Whitehead and Deleuze and Guattari has indeed been a challenging dialogue. I would say at this point, this is probably way too heavy for me to even have considered. So no, I don't actually get what you're probably intending to convey.
But you get the idea of the pitiless monologue, right?
Yeah,
People
yeah.
using language to make an appearance of a conversation between equals,
I see.
right? That's the way conversation is meant. Hey, let's have a conversation about this, right? That
Right.
implication emotionally is that let's have an equal exchange of ideas on this so that we together can make a decision. They're arguing that what's actually happening is not a conversation, but a monologue, a pitiless monologue, in fact. And they think one party is thinking they're trying to come to a compromise. The other party has no intention of doing anything close to that.
I see. So it's almost like a certain kind of disingenuous nature of what one thinks of as dialogue, when really all one is doing is vomiting on the other person, and then thinking as if that is coming to some sort of conclusion or better understanding between the two.
One party wants a shared understanding. The other one wants an elimination of the other.
But are those two attitudes, are they well, I mean, is that, are they cognizant though of the two, each other?
Not necessarily, because again, when you consider these value versus virtue discussions, some might see that eliminating someone else's speech is valuable and virtuous. Virtuous. Get it? Virtuous.
Yes.
So this has been the Squarespace, Degenerate Conversations and a Broadcaster Voice. We've been talking to Space Cat. And it's interesting that Space Cat and I have not always been able to interact in a healthy way, but I think by adopting this pedantic voice, we have found a design pattern that allows us to eliminate the audience, but find a lot of value in each other. I don't care that it's only us here. I could give a shit. If people can't hang, that's fine. If people don't want to hang, that's fine too. It's, 11 a.m. Eastern. But I find this conversation valuable because I find it valuable, and that's good enough for me.
Speaking of value, there is a certain phrase or book that I had read that I need to find real quick. I actually took a picture of it once, and I want to be able to put that in that nest as part of this interaction. If you give me a moment.
Is you can use the comment section, in the bottom right-hand corner, because
Right.
anything in the nest gets deleted.
Gotcha. All right.
So,
I'm still here. All right.
Driven expression. How did you feel about the Squarespace? Do you think we got further using this design pattern versus other modes of interaction?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Because really part of it has a lot to do with not just one-on-one, but one needs an audience at the same time to be heard or to feel like they are being heard, even if all of the sort of minutia of what it is that it seems like one person expects or demands or does with their own level of intent.
The thing is that I've been contacted by people who listen back to these recorded spaces. So I know that somebody is going to be hearing the sentence that I'm saying right now in the future. And it's probably a bunch of our friends, right? And so while we don't have a present audience, that doesn't mean we're not going to have a future audience. And when I was, having this discussion with you today, I was trying to bear in mind that there would be an audience that would be listening to this in the future. So I'm kind of presenting it in a way that I know other people are going to listen to, right? And so that's I want to make sure that I got your audio clear, all that stuff, right? Because I think the way you plotted through the blog post was great. At the very least, I saw the grammatical errors I needed to change.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, and for any future audience that happens to hear this and maybe some of this resonates with them in some way, peace to be upon you as well. I'm still finding that image. Hold up one sec.
Yeah. Welcome, NFTs Are Worthless, to the Squarespace, Degenerate Conversations in a Broadcaster Voice. We've been talking about how a pianist plays a percussive instrument. NFTs. I was telling somebody that we need to create completely different alt accounts that have no followers.
Yes, we do.
Whoever thought we'd be in a position to be like, yo, how do we get even less of an audience? It's becoming more and more difficult. Which may be a success.
Good but bad. Bad but good.
One of those good problems, as they would say in The Wire.
Are you referring to The Wire on HBO?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Shit. I think NFTs Are Worthless would have the best impersonation of the shit.
The ever so well esteemed Senator Clay Davis. Of course. We'll find out.
Shit.
Have you ever seen the Clay Davis supercut of all his shits? It's pretty great.
Yep. I'm all about that.
$11.11, make a wish.
I'll be right there with that.
I thought you would say coming around the mountain.
Yes. 1 sec.
Welcome to the Squarespace, Degenerate Conversations in a Broadcaster Voice.
Doing a.
I thought that was Brian talking for a minute.
It was Brian talking for a minute.
Oh, is that right? We're doing a southern twang now. All right.
Take it away, Brian.
Well, somebody just want to hear me talk?
Music to your ears.
Just had to stop in and see how my two favorite people in the world are on Twitter.
We were thinking about creating accounts with no followers to run away from the audience we've cultivated.
Dude, you're a stick figure unicorn. It's like ingrained in so many people's heads right now.
The thing is, like, I don't know the effect I have on people, right? It seems kind of weird to me that anyone would want to listen to this in a lot of ways.
You just go with the jabs. You know, like the '80s pictures that you put on Twitter last night because you were bored.
What was it like being a wrestler in the '80s, Brian?
Well, I don't think we had cable, Bobby, so I don't think I got to watch a whole lot of wrestling.
It's probably because you spent so much time in the squared circle.
I think we rented the videos every now and again.
Yep. SummerSlams, all that stuff. That was my Saturday night. My Saturday night was a wrestling video with chips and dip.
Wait a minute, you just asked me how was the wrestling in the '80s, and then turned around and commented with the fact that your Saturday nights was chips and dip with WWE porn.
It's what brings our two cultures together.
I love you to death. I swear, not everybody can catch how intelligent you really are at times.
The only way I figured out how to not become degenerate is to use this broadcaster voice, which is kind of like trammo lines.
Right.
So it prevents me from, going on full Mattios interaction mode.
Right.
All human interaction can be defined as a trade.
Right.
Every time a human being interacts with another, an exchange takes place.
Right.
In every conversation we have, we exchange information with each other. Even the most trivial information is of some value to the other person. If information didn't have any value to us, we wouldn't talk to each other. Either what the other person says is valuable to us, or we find it valuable to give information to them. Oftentimes both. At the core of all human interaction that isn't violent, both parties perceive that they gain some value from it. Otherwise, the interaction wouldn't have taken place at all. Civilizations began this way. Two people find it valuable to interact with each other. That's all it takes. So what constitutes value? Well, there's the labor theory of value. There's the exchange theory of value. It's interesting because we were talking about language as a way to eliminate the opposition, not as a way to have a conversation.
True. I suppose that.
Well, guys, it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. I got a crap load of stuff to do today. So
Not a problem. Can you give me your Squarespace introduction, and we'll end it.
this is the Squarespace. Degenerate conversations with the broadcaster voice. Something like that.